I'm Rob Licuria, Senior Editor at Gold Derby, here with Tobias Menzies. Tobias, firstly, congratulations on your first ever Emmy nomination.
Thank you very much. Yeah, it's exciting.
Where were you when you found out about the nomination?
I think I found out from my phone, as most things are found out from now. I think my agent messaged. Yeah, I was sort of, I was actually doing a sort of workshop thing with a director friend who I'm developing something with. So we were sort of spent the afternoon, our heads were kind of in that. So it was a nice, really nice surprise.
And, you know, I have to admit, I had to double check that this was actually your first. And then I was thinking, what the hell took so long? Like, I can't believe that after all these years, you finally made it at the TV Academy, but I'm glad they finally caught up.
Well done, Emmys. You were slow, but you got there. Yeah.
You got there in the end. Yeah, a lot of people were super thrilled. Of course, not only with your nomination, but the show itself just completely obliterated expectations. Like, it's just a field leader. Most of the cast were nominated. The show, obviously, Peter Morgan. Are you, like, obviously you worked on the show quite some time ago now, but are you super thrilled to look back at all your colleagues to see that they're all up there as well?
Yeah, absolutely. And, directors like Jess Hobbs was nominated as well. And so, yeah, I mean, I think big picture is it's a significant achievement. Obviously, The Crown has had huge success in terms of awards over the years, but I think for a show in its fourth season to have this number of nominations still, I think, counts for quite a lot, because I think it's one thing to create a very special show, a very well-loved show, obviously viewed hugely and has had a lot of awards. But I think sustaining shows, I think, is also a particular skill. And so for that reason, it's sort of exciting to just be keeping the story alive to this extent and to such a high level. So it's exciting.
You're right, because often the Emmys move on from shows after a few years, but on this occasion they really double down. But that's because, and I mean, Netflix should be so proud as well for what they've been able to put out for this show. But season 4 was absolutely, like, unbelievable. No one thought The Crown would just keep getting better and better, but it certainly has. And so let's drill down a little about season 4, particularly with your character, Prince Phillip. So we've talked before about the tightrope between authenticity and parody or mimicry. We talked about that last year, but I was wondering whether it was even more of an issue, given that over season 4, Phillip was much older. And so was that delicate balance of portraying him, someone that we're very familiar with, all the more challenging this time?
Yeah, that dance, yes, definitely deepened, because, yes, by season 4, I'm playing quite significantly older than I am in real life. So, but also, you can't work it too hard. But I mean, I get, obviously, hair and makeup definitely helped a huge amount. And then, I guess you just sort of try and grade in a few, a little slower in the movement. Actually didn't try and change the voice, really. I think we kind of all felt that I think that has to have us, there has to be some things that maybe there's continuity in. And so vocally, I didn't really change it up much. And so I kept on telling myself, really, as long as you get it close enough, that an audience can then sort of forget about it and then go into the drama. And as you say, the balancing between the real people, drama, and sort of falling into mimicry, that also continued. The sort of toggling between those things, because you don't, too much mimicry, I think, is just sort of tiring to watch. But you do need to get close. But all those things, in that regard, the job was really consistent. It was the same questions.
It would be like watching Saturday Night Live if it was too much mimicry, and there's a place for that for sure, particularly when you want to laugh. But in this, obviously, that's not the genre you're working in. I was reminded in a few scenes when I revisited them not long ago with you as Prince Phillip, that the voice is actually really distinctive. And to me, it sounds pretty spot on, but I don't really remember what he was like back then because I was too young. I just was wondering, what do you have to do as a performer, as an actor, to go through the process to get that voice right? Do you have a coach? Do you practice? Like, really, they're really fundamental questions, but we'd love to know how you get there.
Yeah, I mean, we do have a couple of voice coaches working with us. But the boring answer is there sort of isn't a replacement for just listening to them a huge amount and just trying it out. And then I think, I mean, after a lot of kind of just breaking the ground and getting kind of the basics right, then I think the coaches did really help in terms of, I suppose, maybe helping you to highlight particular sounds that really helped. I think there were certain sounds that really kind of rooted it and did a lot of the heavy lifting. And so that kind of external ear to understand, you know, what the sort of structure of it was. But yeah, for me, and I think there were different approaches through the cast, but for me, I just had to listen to it an awful lot until I kind of got bored and angry. And because part of it is, I guess part of the challenge is trying to make it natural. It doesn't feel like a performance, it doesn't sound like someone else's voice. And that, I think, repetition, I think, definitely was a big part of that. Just sort of going through something so that it then becomes maybe muscular rather than conscious or something. So it's in your body a bit, and then you can kind of forget about it. And hopefully then maybe you get a sweet spot of it starting to feel authentic.
Yeah. A similar thing was what Gillian Anderson told us not long ago about her performance as Thatcher, because we, as the audience who are not trained as actors, performers, we have no idea how you do it, but we just get so caught up in the moment and in the character and get immersed in the story that we forget that there's a lot of stuff going on in your head and behind the scenes. So yeah, I think it's a really good job. I also wanted to talk about, obviously, Prince Phillip himself, given that he passed away not long ago. So he was in the news a lot. So he still seems front of mind for us, even though he's now passed away. But the show does a great job, I think, of humanizing them, the whole family, particularly him, because he was pretty divisive to begin with. But in recent years, I think, particularly after his recent passing, sentiment appeared to have really overwhelmingly shifted to the positive, and that was my perception. I'm wondering what your impression was, particularly when you were doing all your research and getting to know the guy, and then you saw in the news a few months ago how he was lionized as this great kind of saint.
Yes. Yeah, I mean, I don't know what I thought about it, really. It was quite interesting. In the UK, the BBC, which is the national broadcaster here, dedicated 6 days of coverage and interviews and films about his life. And it actually got to the point where I think there were sort of viewers were writing letters of complaint because it felt too much. And I don't know either way, but it felt like a throwback in terms of a broadcaster's response to a royal death, back to maybe an older time. And yeah, there's in some of the response you got, is this sort of, have they pitched this right? I think, I mean, the truth about his life seems to be that he's gone through lots of different waves. And in some way that is shown articulated in the show, you know, him and the Queen as a young couple, as her as a young queen and him as a young man, they were superstars, you know, very handsome, sort of on the front of publications all over the world. Then I think they've definitely had periods where they really haven't been very well liked. And obviously we start the journey of one of those stories which had a big impact on their popularity, which was the story of Diana. I feel like, I mean, I think the honest truth is that I think in the how his death was represented, it's probably a touch of sort of hagiography about it. You know, I think it's probably polishing off and certainly sort of maybe nipping out some of the things that he's less sort of the stuff that people bother people. But I think, yeah, I find it very hard to get a sense of like what does the nation think of that family? And the truth is, I think it's really varied. There's sort of every opinion in the book, and so one thing I do know is I don't think he would have been particularly bothered. I get the sense that he would have, because I think he did strike me that he had a very sane understanding of what it was to be in the public eye, and that if you're in the public eye, you're there to be shot at. And so, I think he probably wouldn't have wanted 6 days of programs about him.
No, I think you're right. I think that's one of the things that comes out in your performance about him, is that he did come across as quite pragmatic and a realist. But then, of course, then he had his own issues, which we're going to explore shortly. Yeah, I agree. As someone from the Commonwealth, we had a similar situation where it was just non-stop Prince Phillip for days, which was particularly galling for people in Australia, New Zealand and so forth, because, this was the mother country and, we're trying to be a bit more independent. So I get it, yeah. And I still care deeply about these characters on this show, notwithstanding that I'm such an anti-royalist personally. So it's a really weird dichotomy when we're watching the show. It's strange.
I still meet people who say, I won't watch that show because I don't agree with the institution.
Yeah.
And it's very interesting. And I similarly, I would say, I think I was anti-royalist, but kind of working within it. But I think what the show does well is that you can be interested in the show and not have to love the institution.
That's exactly right. I don't really like mobsters, but I loved The Sopranos. It's a similar situation.
It's a really good example.
It's just such a really damn good show and a good drama. Let's talk about the episode that was submitted for you at the Emmys. Firstly, Gold Stick, the first one. What ultimately went into that decision of choosing that one to submit to Emmy voters?
Well, I mean, the honest truth is there's obviously less, there isn't an equivalent of episode 7 from season 3 to submit. My stuff is a little more spread out, and I'm definitely more of a sort of supporting position in this season. So it was a little bit of a toss-up, because there's sort of a few different members I think could have worked quite well. I suppose it's just a favourite of mine, because I got to do very little with Josh. And so I really liked that scene and working with him for that day. I also think I like the scene because you don't see us interacting, and then you have this scene. I suppose it felt like the scene which revealed the kind of layers of him the most. There's a lot more front on him, I think, in this season. You see the kind of presentation, but in that scene, in a rather difficult to watch way, his sort of underbelly is revealed, and his sort of more irrational, more uncontrolled, and so it's sort of the thing that I like. And so I thought, and also it's episode 1, so they wouldn't have to fast forward too much.
That's right. It was easier. You were doing them a favor.
Exactly. Saving them some time.
To be completely honest, I think that was the right decision. It's a really, really strong episode for you, for the cast. Actually, it's a great opener. We'll go straight to the scene with Charles, played by Josh O'Connor. It's where Philip opines that Dickie was like the surrogate father to Charles, and how he felt replaced and overlooked. And there's so much going on with your expression: regret, sadness, and resentment. To me, it felt, again, it was a way for me to get into this character and maybe even slightly relate to him from personal experience, perhaps when it comes to the relationships between fathers and sons, which is quite universal. So I just wonder if any of all of that stuff was going through your mind when you read the script, and then it was time to actually play it on stage and on screen.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's what seemed interesting to me was that it's dealing in these archetypes, fathers and sons, layers of fathers and sons, and people who have played father or son, you know, so not necessarily by birth. And so, and yeah, we have Mountbatten, who has clearly been a father to Philip and now has played the same role to Charles, and particularly chooses Charles to speak at his funeral in his will. And so Philip feels that Charles is like the chosen child, and yet he is the father to that child. And so the kind of weird miswiring of all that, I really liked the writing for that, because actually in the scene, Charles becomes the parent, weirdly, and Philip regresses in some way, becomes the kind of irrational child, hurt and unable to kind of hide his, he sort of becomes very childlike. I mean, it was an interesting scene, because actually it's sort of unique, I think, in certainly stuff I got to play, because he spoke incredibly candidly in it, and Philip doesn't really do that very much. Even in, say, the episode 7 stuff in season 3, there's a bit more context for that. He's talking to a priest. There's something more sort of structured about that. Whereas here, there were, when I first saw the script, I was like, how can I get to a place where Philip speaks like this? And so I quite early on, which wasn't in the script, thought the idea of that he had been drinking, and so maybe that was a route into kind of unlocking, why he's able to speak so loosely and so kind of unguardedly to Charles, because it did feel out of character. And I feel that sort of works really well, kind of, because again, that's another aspect that he's not a drinker in the show, really. But all, given the circumstances, they all feel like, you could make that work. You could earn that. So mixture of that sort of stuff.
Yeah, and it was just a way in, I guess. That conversation, if it happened in real life, would have been quite a powerful one and very painful to have with your son, and so that's why I think it really does resonate. But what makes it better is, if you look back in the episode, it opens at the dining table with Philip quietly berating Lord Mountbatten before his untimely death. That palpable tension comes up again. It starts to boil up. So it was introduced, and then throughout the middle of the episode, we get to see Philip with Anne, and showing kind of love and empathy and engagement, encouragement with her, telling a self-doubting Anne that she's brilliant, resilient, and I think determined young woman. And then, later at the equestrian event, seeing how proud he was of her. So that juxtaposition also gives us more insight. So maybe talk us through working with Erin Doherty, because those scenes are actually really, really quite effective too, in a more quiet way.
Yeah, she's a joy to work with, Erin, and I think sadly overlooked actually in this list. Though I'm sure, she'll be winning Emmys for years to come, I've no doubt. I guess it's something that we've tracked all the way through, is in a way the juxtaposition of Philip with his daughter and Philip with his son, and what a gulf there is between those two relationships. And what's interesting about that is that obviously you get kind of range of him as a parent, but I think it really adds spice to the relationship with Charles when you do finally have that scene, as you see just how different it is and how unable he is to offer the same parental affection and support and encouragement that he's able to do with Anne. And so you're then definitely left with it's a personality thing, they just that's something about Charles just grates Philip. And I always kind of wondered whether, I suppose I thought about it a little bit, that I tried to play it, that there's something about Charles's vulnerabilities that actually Philip relates to. but Philip has suppressed them, and he's sort of needs Charles to suppress them too, because it's too uncomfortable to see him be this kind of sensitive. But I sort of feel like it's not because he doesn't understand, it's because he understands too much of it.
Yeah, I think that's actually spot on. And I think that would be quite a common scenario with a lot of fathers and sons, perhaps, or parents and children. Again, this show goes super deep.
There's also a practicality to it, which I think is partly why the relationship with Charles is slightly different to Anne, is that Charles needs at some point will be king. And so I think there's also a practicality about sort of business of the crown that he worries for Charles. The truth is, I think he would say, you can't be this sensitive and do this job.
Yeah.
You're going to have to grow some more skin. And maybe in a slightly perverse way, he thinks, I'm going to be the person that's going to force you to grow that skin, even though it doesn't work. But I feel like I wanted to find a kind of rationale, a kind of caring rationale for why he is as harsh on him as he is. But I don't get a sense it's not just neglect.
No, there's so much more to it, and that's why it was important to see him with Anne and how caring he was, and then see him with Charles, and he's kind of almost trying to do the same thing, but he can't. They don't have the same relationship, and that was, to me, quite painful to watch in a good way. And that's why I think that episode was the perfect submission for you this year. So good on you. I hope that you feel the same way. Before we go, I just want to mention for all our viewers, this season you won a SAG Ensemble Prize at the SAGs. You've been nominated at the Emmys, the Critics' Choice, the Golden Globes, and the BAFTAs. So that's nothing to sneeze at. It's pretty good work. No. But most of all, I must say, congratulations on your Gold Derby Award nomination. I will be voting 15,000 times just to make sure we get you at the top of that list, okay? So,
thank you so much. Well, I really appreciate your interest and support over the years. It means a lot, because I can tell that you're someone who views this stuff in a nuanced and interested way. So your support is really valuable to me.
I appreciate that, Tobias. Well, anyway, look, I'll be rooting for you on Emmy night, and good luck and congratulations. And I look forward to seeing more of you in whatever you're working on next.
Thanks, Rob. Really nice to chat to you. Take care.